So let's look at Nietzsche's On Truth and Lies in a Non-Moral Sense. Friedrich Nietzsche, this was written, it's like 1873, so almost a century after Kant. And, quite a different take than Kant, obviously, a different sort of piece, different sort of text, a crazy text in a way, and a surprising text, and in some ways, I would imagine, more difficult than Kant. Um, but let's try to put it in the context of this class. It may help. We're not trying to understand everything about this text, and perhaps there are some things that Nietzsche says which are really, said a little more for effect and as being funny, which is always good. Things being funny. But we want to get a general sense of what Nietzsche's getting at, and I think, again, to relate it to what we've done so far with Kant and what is enlightenment, that may give us a framework for reading Nietzsche, which may help us make sense of it, I hope. It is kind of a crazy text, and it can be difficult. I think there's so many things going on in this text, and I hope to point to a few things that may help in terms of thinkers or developments in the history of philosophy, science, history itself, which are kind of in the background of Nietzsche's text here and not mentioned by name, either the themes or the authors that may have influenced Nietzsche. But I presented, at least in these little videos, Kant's What is Enlightenment as really being about knowledge and about the value of knowledge. What Kant seemed to be getting at, amongst other things, but centrally in What is Enlightenment is the essential importance of knowledge and the progress of knowledge in human history. That is, that it is in our nature to make progress in knowledge, to get closer to truth, to obtain truth. It's really what he calls the original destiny of the human species. And the whole thrust of that essay was let's do what we need to do to move that forward, to make progress in enlightenment as a species, as the interrelated process of an individual and a society, and perhaps by extension the whole human species moving closer to truth and knowledge and everything that goes along with that. Uh, what could we say about Nietzsche, and generally speaking, before we get into the details of what he's getting at, some of the details in the text? I don't think Nietzsche could take a more different approach and have more of a different evaluation of the value of knowledge than Kant did. You could say about this text on Truth and Lies that I would say that it is an attack both on the possibility of knowledge and the value of knowledge. So, thinking ahead to the end of the text, there seems to be a celebration of the person who ignores knowledge, who prefers myth, who prefers art, who in a certain sense prefers lies over truth. Uh, we'll see how we get there. But in generally speaking, I think that this essay is about knowledge and the value of truth and knowledge and the possibility of truth and knowledge, and a very different approach to what Kant was getting at. And in fact, although I don't know if he has Kant directly in mind, Kant would be just the sort of target that Nietzsche seems to have in mind in terms of opposing the ideas of the usual notion of what knowledge is and what value it has for human beings. We get that right away, that sort of undermining of what knowledge is, in the very first sentence of this essay. He says, "Once upon a time," and that's a good opening because so much of this is about storytelling and myth and illusion, and as opposed to reality and things themselves. Once upon a time, as if Nietzsche himself is telling a kind of story in this essay rather than trying to arrive at the truth, because we'll see that for various reasons that he himself brings up, the very notion of telling a truth is what's in doubt here. So he himself starts out. That's interesting. I wonder what it's like in the original German. I don't know, but he says once upon a time, as if he's telling a children's story. Once upon a time, In some out-of-the-way corner of that universe which is dispersed into numberless twinkling solar systems, there was a star upon which clever beasts invented knowing. And it's that jarring uh, expression, invented knowing, which is the first thing that come across, first thing we have to sort of deal with, interpret in this essay. First of all, we are the clever beasts, no doubt. It's a story about us. We are the clever beasts, and that notion of characterizing us as beasts, as animals. One of the things that I think that we'll see is in the background of Nietzsche's thought here is Darwinism. I don't know how well or how closely Nietzsche ever read Darwin. I don't know if he ever did actually see Darwin. But the Darwinistic, naturalistic approach to thinking about human beings is certainly something that's very prominent in the essay. We are beasts. We'll see that we're animals amongst other animals in nature, and that's a very important part of what's to come. But we clever beasts invented knowing. Now that's very strange. That seems like what they would say a category. What is an example of a category mistake? You can't invent knowing. Knowing is just it's an activity or a phenomenon of human existence, but not the kind of thing that you can invent. But Nietzsche is purposely trying to shock us into thinking about knowledge in a different way. Human beings invented the wheel. Human beings invented the house. Human beings invented democracy. Human beings invented the internal combustion engine. And human beings invented knowing. That is, the whole idea of knowing, having knowledge, and what it means to have knowledge, Nietzsche is saying and indicating right here in the beginning, is a human artifact, a human construction. It's not a phenomenon which is sort of built into the structure of reality. Knowing, the phenomenon of knowing something, is a human thing, first of all, through and through human. And that, like all human things, it's sort of constructed by human beings for human purposes. So the first thing that Nietzsche wants to do is, you might say, deflate knowledge, deflate the value of knowledge. He goes on, that was the most arrogant and mendacious, untruthful, deceitful minute of world history. But nevertheless, it was only a minute. After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star cooled and congealed, and the clever beasts had to die. Again, sort of naturalistic view of the human species. We emerge out of nature, and eventually we will go extinct. Just as the whole universe is gradually grinding to a halt, we'll be gone long before then. One might invent such a fable, and yet he still would not have adequately illustrated how miserable, how shadowy and transient, how aimless and arbitrary the human intellect looks within nature. That's again a big contrast with Kant, isn't it? The notion that the human intellect is aimless and arbitrary. Especially aimless seems to be a contrast with Kant. One of the things that it's a big idea in Kant is that the human intellect is moving towards something. It's making progress. It's heading towards enlightenment. It's not aimless at all. The human intellect is in the process of discovering the truth about itself and about the world. That gives it direction. Reforming society to make it more just and getting a clearer picture of the nature of reality, the way that science, politics, and morality all seem to be moving towards something in Kant's view. Nietzsche is saying, no, the human intellect, it has no inherent purpose. It is aimless and arbitrary. He continues, and when it, he says, there were eternities during which it did not exist. And when it is all over with the human intellect, nothing will have happened. That is, the human being with his intellect appears on the earth and moves around the earth for a while, and then inevitably, like all species, will disappear. And nothing will have happened. There will be no permanent change in the universe that will happen because of human beings and their intellect. For this intellect, he continues, has no additional mission which would lead it beyond human life. Rather, it is human. and only its possessor and begetter takes it so solemnly, as though the world's axis turned within it. There's another big theme here that Nietzsche is claiming about human beings, is that they see themselves as at the center of the world, center of creation. They imagine that everything here is for them, and that the world is set up for them, and that this is a profound illusion that human beings have about themselves and about their faculties, and that it's just pride. It's just really indefensible pride on the part of human beings to think that they're so important and that what they're doing has any significance beyond their limited little world. He does mention that in the second paragraph, first page. He says the pride connected with knowing and sensing, that is sense perception, lies like a blinding fog over the eyes and senses of men, thus deceiving them concerning the value of existence. So, a questioning of what knowledge is, truth is, generally speaking, a questioning of what their value is, just as it's an overall questioning of the value of human existence. But we ask, okay, we do have intellect. Knowledge is intellect. So he said they're aimless and arbitrary, but that couldn't be entirely true. I mean, he has this naturalistic picture of the world that he's already hinted at. Human beings are beasts, they're animals. They exist in a little planet revolving around a little star that's of no particular significance in the universe as a whole. They emerge out of nature and they live for a while and they will eventually go extinct. Naturalistic picture, which is very amenable to Darwinism, the evolutionary picture. In that evolutionary picture, the faculties that living things develop, their physical and their behavioral or intellectual capacities, are not entirely aimless and arbitrary. That is, they develop these things for a reason, do they not? Well, Nietzsche seems to be thinking along with that. There's two places in the first page that he indicates that. First, in the second paragraph, where he says the intellect was allotted to these most unfortunate, delicate, and ephemeral beings merely as a device for detaining them a minute within existence. And then he refers to the intellect in the bottom of the page as a means for the preserving of the individual. What, not generally speaking, is a Darwinian or evolutionary take on what the intellect is. The intellect is a tool for survival, just like the opposable thumb or the senses or the other things that human beings developed in their natural history as a means for preserving themselves and perhaps preserving the species as well. A very new take on the intellect. The intellect, mind, knowing, not as something that's primarily there to understand truth, not something that's there to get at the heart of reality, to understand reality, but rather as a device or as a means for the preserving of the individual, that is, as an adaptation. I don't think that word is ever actually used by Nietzsche, but that seems to be what he's getting at. The intellect as an adaptation, the intellect as a device, the intellect as something that adds to the survival chances of the individual. If we think about the intellect, think about knowledge in that way, what is the purpose of the intellect? It is simply a means, not a means to truth, but a means to help the individual. And then the question is, well, how important is truth then? How important is truth for the preservation of the individual? And is truth even important? He suggests that the real purpose, I'll get into this in the next video, the real purpose of the intellect is not truth, it's lies. That is dissimulation, as he calls it. That is deception. Do we really use our intellect most of the time to get truth? Or do we really use our intellect most of the time to fool others to get what we want?